You can imagine the election has major economic consequences too, and we've got our business editor Stephen Carroll on hand to talk a bit more about that. Let's start with the stock market. How are investors reacting?
Well, I mean, much like everyone else, they're trying to figure out exactly what this means and what sort of result we're going to end up with. So plenty of volatility out there on the market, certainly playing catch-up is the name of the game for investors. European markets had started the day fairly firmly in the red, but they have turned positive as trading has gone on. This is the picture a short time ago on the European markets. Many market watchers are pointing to the bets that investors had been making on a blue wave of Democratic victories in advance of the election. Those didn't materialise, so there are lots of people out there scrambling to move their money around now as a result. We have seen the dollar get stronger in trading today. That's usually what happens when there's uncertainty out there. The dollar is seen as a safe haven investment, so that's where people have been putting their money. We're also keeping an eye on what's happening with the futures markets in the United States. These is pre-market trading, looking ahead to what's happening on Wall Street when trading begins there in a couple of hours' time. Big swings there as well. A short time ago, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ were expected to open up, but the Dow Jones expected to open in the red. It's just reflecting the uncertain picture that exists really everywhere around this story. There are two schools of thought from investors. One is that Donald Trump could be good news for business in terms of lower taxes and less regulation. That could be particularly good news for the technology sector because there's investigations ongoing into big tech in particular, whereas Joe Biden is seen to be more of a positive from the stimulus side of things, of perhaps the idea of getting a bigger stimulus package.
Stephen, staying with the money theme, this election was so expensive. I don't have any words to explain. I'm hoping you do, because we're talking about a lot of money.
We are talking about a lot of money, a record-breaking amount of money. The estimate is $14 billion that was spent on the campaigns. That's since the midterm elections in 2018. We don't get full accounts from the campaigns until the end of January next year. So these are estimates based on the figures that we already have, plus the projections for donations that have happened since from the Nonpartisan Centre for Responsive Politics. So $14 billion, just under it actually, the overall picture they say for this two-year electoral cycle. That breaks down into $6.6 billion for the presidential election and just over $7 billion for the Senate and House races as well. Absolutely eye-watering figures. The figures are double, more than double in fact, what they were for all elections in 2016. Look, even just the presidential race is more than what we had seen in spending across all of the elections 4 years ago. Along party lines, Democrats outspent Republicans almost 2-1. Remember, this does include the primary campaign. So when you look at that Democratic figure of $6.9 billion, $1.4 billion of that came from Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer, of course, no longer or didn't go that far in the race anyway. But Democrats had seen a big increase in donations, both running up to the midterms in 2018, and that has continued through this electoral cycle as well.
So how much of all that money came from donations?
So if we look at the presidential races, Joe Biden is set to become the first candidate to have topped $1 billion in donations. These are the latest figures from the campaigns. They're from up until mid-October. Joe Biden having collected $938 million in donations, and we know that donations had increased in the final weeks of the campaign. That's why we have this projection he's going to have surpassed at the end of the day $1 billion in donations. Donald Trump, for his part, just under $600 million in donations for his campaign as well. Interestingly, both parties did secure more donations from small donors, people giving under $200. That's now made up 22% of the overall donations for this campaign. In 2016, it was 15%. So it's a fairly significant increase in people giving smaller amounts of money to political campaigns. There are fundraising records being broken all over the place in this election. The Senate races too, take for the example South Carolina, the Democrat Jamie Harrison, who was trying to defeat Lindsey Graham, didn't manage to do so, but he became the first Senate candidate to collect over $100 million in donations. Didn't yield a victory for him in the end, showing that perhaps money isn't everything in these races.
It's